Hello and welcome to the Olfactive Melbourne podcast. I'm your host, Trent Stokes.
And I'm Robin Stokes. We're a husband and wife team passionate about perfume, and we're on a journey to better understand and explore the art of perfumery. We're coming to you today from Melbourne, Australia, and we'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we're recording. They are the Wurundjeri and Bunurong people of the Kulin Nation. We pay our respects to the elders, past and present, and we extend that same respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are listening to the recording today.
On this show, we interview Australia's premier niche, artisanal and indie perfume brands, from the founders to the perfumers and onto the creatives who take us on a guided journey through a fragrance that best represents their brand. The show is wrapped around a masterclass in which we invite our guests to take us through each stage of the opening, the heart, and the base. The show unfolds in real time, meaning that there is time in between the opening and the heart and the base. And this is known as the dry down. During the dry down, we take the opportunity to deep dive into the perfumer's journey, their brand, their mission, their vision, their values, along with getting a better understanding of some of the technical terms in perfumery, along with how to identify individual notes and accords so that we can more deeply connect with perfumery, and also so that we can better identify the notes that we like and dislike. This allows us to make more informed decisions about the fragrances that we connect with and that we ultimately wear. The show is designed to be both educational and entertaining. So if you like what we do, please like and subscribe and make sure to sit back, relax and enjoy the show. The Olfactive Melbourne podcast is proudly sponsored by Watchvault, Australia's premier destination for luxury and vintage timepieces. Each watch is trusted, verified and ready for its next chapter. Visit watchvault.com.au to discover your next timeless investment. Hello and welcome to another episode of Olfactive Melbourne. Today's episode is a little bit different. We're now roughly about halfway through our very first season, and we thought it would be a great opportunity to reflect back on everything that we've learnt so far. It's been an amazing season so far, and we'd like to share with you some of our key learnings, along with some of our favourite moments.
Over the past several months, we've had the privilege of speaking with a number of perfumers and brand owners. And today we'd like to take you back through some of those conversations, to some of the major learnings that we've had, some of the aha moments, and some of the information that we found really interesting.
So our very first guest on the show was Patrick Beggs and Sandrine Keogh of Signet Perfumery, a beautiful natural Australian brand focused on natural botanical perfumes. We were introduced to a range of different perfume notes and perfume concepts, and one in particular really stood out for us, and it's this idea of perfection in imperfection. And this really is a celebration of the variation in those natural botanical fragrances as each season ebbs and flows. Let's take a look at that clip now.
I really wanted to, foster more of a mindful consumer. I think that a lot of things are overproduced, mass-made, that isn't necessarily respectful to the ingredients that we're working with. These are really, precious materials, and the way they change from the soil they're grown in to what the climate was doing that year really affects their smell. And I think that's something we're not really aware of as a consumer. So I wanted to really highlight that, a bit like with winemaking. Just smelling that variation, because there is perfection in imperfection. We're not just producing this juice that smells exactly the same from batch to batch. I really want to highlight, the beauty of change through that.
We also learned that the note that we know in perfumery as mimosa is also known to Australians more commonly as wattle. which really connects us back to the natural landscape in Australia. Let's take a listen as we discover this.
Let's have a look at Primavera, which is our floral fragrance in the collection, released in spring. And it really, I think if there's one perfume that is seasonal, a great time to wear it is spring. It smells of pollen, like nectar, honey. It is really inspired by I guess that regeneration of everything awakening up. It has a beautiful beeswax absolute in it that I use in a honeycomb accord. Lots of rare flowers like pink lotus and wattle, or as it's known in perfumery, mimosa, and linden blossom, which I love, as you might know, with the old plein air. Yeah. And an orris butter, which is just, a gorgeous material. Yeah.
Did you know that wattle was referred to as mimosa? There was
something new there, yeah.
Yeah, and you do get different kinds as well, so it's not all just the one kind of, different, kinds of mimosa.
So Sandrine also introduced us to the fragrance family Fougère. Fougère in French simply means fern, and it is a fragrance family that is characterized by fresh, green, and slightly woody notes.
We also learned about oak moss as a fixative. This is a foundational ingredient that helps to stabilize a fragrance, especially the lighter, more volatile notes. Let's take a listen.
I don't think I mentioned plein air as a Fougère fragrance, which is a fragrance family that's really centered around oak moss, coumarin, which is what is in tonka bean, and often geranium and vetiver, and lavender is the really important one. So with the base notes, we get that really strong coumarin, pneumone, hay note from the tonka bean. And tonka bean is also a little bit sweet, and it can have a kind of vanilla facet to it, and which I know you noted before, the sweetness. And then the vetiver is a beautiful Haitian vetiver. It's got that earthiness to it, that depth, and the oak moss brings a real kind of undergrowth facet to it. So fougère means fern in French, and I also use notes which used to be listed, like patchouli. I know that we had a chat about patchouli in the plein air earlier.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that is now more of a support note of the oak moss. Patchouli has this beautiful kind of undergrowth mossy facet to it that we've used to push the oak moss. So for me, the dry down it's earthy. There's still a little bit of sweetness of that hay, but it has to me like a really dry facet to it. Like there's a little bit of woodiness coming through from the vetiver, and then the tonka bean as well still has that sweet, slightly almost vanilla facet to it. Yeah.
What are you getting off on your skin there? Because I noticed it was still a bit sweet on your skin.
It's still a little bit sweet, but I also get the hay. Now that I know that it's hay, I can recognize it better. And then I think perhaps I'm getting what I think is oak moss, from how you've described it. But I guess I want to ask, does the oak moss help with longevity? I think I've written that along
It does. Yeah, it has great fixative qualities. A lot of the base notes do have that fixative qualities, so they'll help give that longevity to the fragrance. And yeah, it's a really beautiful, deep material. It's actually quite restricted in use now in perfumery. I'm sure that you've heard of IFRA, and they kind of set the standards for how much of each material you can use when you're formulating a fragrance. And some essential oils can be kind of cause you to be sensitive to the sun. Well, you've probably heard of that, like bergamot. So yeah, we follow IFRA standards to make sure that our perfumes are, safe for the consumer. And so with oak moss, it's such a beautiful material. It was used a lot in a lot of vintage perfumes. So I think whilst ours are modern interpretations, there's definitely they've got quite a vintage appeal, a lot of the fragrances. So.
Now, a personal favourite moment of both mine and Robin's during this episode was this moment from Patrick Beggs that really reinforced to us that sharing our learning journey in fragrance and sharing that journey with you is something that actually truly has value.
But I found that actually there was a big hole in the market for this because the perfume industry is only just kind of growing in Australia. It's really exciting. It's awesome to see you guys doing this because it's really young, and I think it's an exciting time to be in Australia. And definitely with botanical perfume as well, there wasn't really anything, there weren't many brands doing that and showing people behind the scenes of how this is made. Very materials and perfumer focused business. So yeah, I guess we did find that it did have a spot in the market, but you might have something else to speak to that.
Yeah, yes and no. I think there's something really special about a business that is come from passion. I think you can feel that in a product. I know I always do when you find something and all of a sudden you look behind the label and you start to know that story a lot more. And the hot word now is authenticity, but Sandrine just has carried that since 12, and to have that passion is really beautiful. I think pretty rare for the market. And my role's just always been just how to support that and how to speak and that people will be introduced and how that's going to work. I think it's really beautiful what you two are doing here, because one thing that we've always come up in the market is that educational piece around what this perfume is and what a perfume can be, because in Australia it just isn't there, that knowledge. But it's starting to get there with the rate of the way that we consume and where we consume. And I think everyone, especially in Melbourne, loves, the hidden coffee corner, but now it's the hidden perfumery, or, it's something new. And I think that's something, but it's been around forever. But it's something new and exciting, but also something that harkens to the traditional techniques have been around. So there's that story that you can really grab onto a historical piece, but then to see it represented in a modern time is really beautiful.
In episode 2, we met Corey Newcomb, who's the founder and perfumer for Criminal Elements Perfumery. Criminal Elements is a brand that pushes the boundary of scent and known for its strong, evocative fragrances.
During the episode, Corey introduced us to a really fundamental concept in terms of constructing perfume. So we know that when we smell perfume, we smell our opening notes first, followed by our heart, and then our base. But that's not the way perfume is actually constructed. Let's take a look at Corey's explanation.
I create a fragrance, contrary to what most beginners might think. You actually have to start with the base notes and work your way up to the top. If you start with the top notes, then you have to wait for the top notes to disappear before you can really smell what's going on underneath properly. And that will take, up to 20 minutes, half an hour, up to an hour sometimes. So you can't really formulate from the top down. You actually have to formulate from the bottom up. So you start with a base, like the base of the pyramid, for example.
Corey also took us through an education on bridging notes. He used an example of his fragrance called Hansel, where saffron acts as a transition between the layers of the composition. Let's take a look.
For this fragrance, saffron is a bridging molecule. I'm not entirely sure if that's the official name for it, but it's essentially a chemical that smells both like a spice and also like leather. So if you've smelt saffron straight out of the jar, it's quite leathery, but it's also spicy and aromatic, and it's got a couple of little facets there. So what that does is it it smooths the transition between the rest of the spices in the composition and the leather and the heart.
Corey also introduced us to a very popular note in perfumery, which is the note of ambergris. Corey explained to us what ambergris actually is and how it's actually used in perfumery. And that gave him the opportunity to introduce us to a fragrance term that we were unfamiliar with, which is the term exaltant. Ambergris is used as a note that amplifies other notes in perfume. Let's get that explanation directly from Corey.
So most people will never have the opportunity to smell it. It is a product that comes from Wales, and it's been extensively studied over the last couple of hundred years. Chemists have been working to isolate the aromatics from it and recreate them in labs. And they've done a spectacular job. I think ambergris is probably one of the best well-made synthetic reconstitutions of the real product that exists out there. Like osmanthus, for example, very expensive, lovely material. The synthetic reconstitutions smell nothing like the natural product. But having tried both, you can basically do a really, really good job. So ambergris smells like papery. It's warm. It's got leathery facets. It's rich. It's elegant. It's also dry. It's also an exaltant, so it makes other materials kind of pop out a bit in the composition. So when you put a bit of ambergris in something, it just makes everything smell like it's got an extra dimension. It's no longer flat. It's no longer just one smell. It's like a spectrum of smells that are all coming at you at the same time.
A personal favourite moment from us from the episode comes towards the end, where Corey tells us that he was not a classically trained perfumer, but that he's actually been self-taught. And he gives us the advice that anybody who has a love of perfumery and who has a playful and creative mindset can do it. Let's hear from Corey.
Oh, my pleasure. Look, I mean, perfumery can be intimidating for people starting out. But like anything, I mean, you don't need to go to cooking school to become a good chef. You could just need to understand what you're working with. And for me, that was just trial and error. So anyone out there who's interested in becoming a perfumer, I would strongly recommend it. It's a great art form. It's a great hobby, even if that's all it is. But all you need to do is just get materials, start sniffing them, mix them together, see what they do and how they smell and how long they last. And then you just kind of develop this understanding of what you're working with. And then you just get more complex as time goes on. So it can happen quite organically. Or you can go to, perfumery school in France and spend 4 years of your life in intense workshops. And that also works. Not for me, but yeah.
In episode 3, we welcomed Sophie Moku, who is the founder of Fikifolia Fragrances. Fikifolia Fragrances is a female-led Australian brand that is all about experiences and memories in Australian cities.
So in the episode, we had a great conversation around the use of synthetics, which Sophie refers to as safe synthetics. Now, this is an extremely important conversation because there's a lot of misinformation out there in perfumery around synthetics and the perception that these things can be dangerous. However, there are safe synthetics as well as dangerous synthetics, just as there is safe naturals and dangerous naturals, and all of this is monitored by IFRA. This was a great conversation. Let's take a look now. As part of that process, and we did a bit of research on your brand before you came on the show, and we've experienced your fragrances before. You've noted that you use a combination of natural ingredients and safe synthetics, which really means that you're talking about a clean formulation. So I guess a two-part question for you. What is a clean formulation, and why should consumers be concerned with a clean formulation?
Okay, I love this question for many reasons. I think what is very sad about the fragrance industry is the fear-mongering about synthetic molecules and aroma molecules, because it is regulated by IFRA, and so all of our fragrances are IFRA compliant. It is not a legal regulation, but it is the only type of regulatory body in fragrance. And I think people are taught to avoid synthetics because that word in itself is quite scary, but it's really not. So to be honest with you, I call them safe synthetics because of that fear that people have. But there are so many regulations now that it's really hard to find synthetic fragrances that are truly bad for you. Definitely a little while ago when it was less regulated, it was very different. But natural fragrances have their own issues. You know, it's so exhausting on the environment. And the pure amount of product you need for a small amount of oil is crazy. There's so much waste. So I think when I talk about natural versus synthetic, I try to speak about it in a way that is digestible for the average consumer who does still hold these kinds of reservations about what is safe and what isn't. But I am very diligent about that, and all of our fragrances are IFRA compliant, so therefore they are considered safe formulations.
Fantastic. It's definitely worth noting that, of course, there are dangerous naturals as well that are also regulated by IFRA and used in very controlled quantities. We did cover that off with a previous guest as well. Just because something is labeled natural doesn't necessarily mean that it's safe. Just something is labeled synthetic doesn't necessarily mean that it is dangerous. What is very, very important here is that you are purchasing fragrances from perfume houses that are compliant with IFRA. If you are not, you are taking a risk. You are putting this substance on your skin and you don't know what's going to happen. So please make sure that you're buying from reputable sources, just like Fikifolia.
Another key insight was around longevity, where Sophie helped us by clearing up any misunderstandings we may have had around concentrations and performance of fragrance on the skin in terms of projection, sillage, and longevity. Let's have a look at what Sophie had to say.
Probably important to note that your perfumes, so all of them are, listed as extrait de parfum, which is, I think, around 25%.
Correct. Yes. So an EDP, which is what you'll find typically in eau de parfum, is typically between 15 and 20%. And then an extrait is anything above 20. I made that choice for a couple of reasons. I think specifically in the Australian landscape, the mass market landscape, people complain, my fragrance doesn't last long enough. And one of the solutions to that is having a higher concentrated fragrance. And I think a caveat to that is also your fragrance isn't lasting long for a lot of reasons. And it's not necessarily reflective of the quality of the fragrance. It could be due to its largely molecular makeup, could be quite small in molecular size. That's why you'll find woody and heavier fragrances, which are typically larger in molecular size, will last longer. But I chose to do extrait because I think that from the perspective of a consumer, this fragrance is going to last you longer because you need a little bit less. And so especially those who are heavy-handed with the spritz, you can still go crazy and it'll last you all day, or you can just spray a little bit and it'll last all day, but just for you.
So this particular episode centered around Sophie's very popular fragrance, Bistro Boy. And Bistro Boy is centered around a rather delicious note of burrata, which is an Italian mozzarella and cream cheese. And this gave us the opportunity to discuss another fragrance family. And that fragrance family is gourmands. And as the name alludes to, it is a reference to notes that are particularly delicious and have a sense of being edible. So let's take a look at Sophie's explanation now. Fantastic. Just before we proceed through some of the notes here, it's probably worth explaining what a gourmand is, because not everybody is super experienced in perfumery. So, Sophie, what is a gourmand?
A gourmand is typically an edible fragrance, or it smells edible. So a lot of your vanillas, your sweet caramels, anything with cocoa. And look, I think that it can vary because you can get gourmandish notes in a fragrance that you wouldn't classify as a gourmand, but it does sit as its own category and family.
So it's a bit delicious. You do want to eat it, but it's not always necessarily food.
Correct.
Yeah.
In episode 4, we introduced Ali Akekli, who is the perfumer and the founder of Uncle Kush Parfum. Uncle Kush Parfum is known for bold, strong fragrances that take us on an olfactory journey through time, and it's inspired by history, mythology, art, and so much more.
Ali is extremely well known for his use of ultra high quality ingredients. And during this conversation, he introduced us to one of his key suppliers, Ensar Oud. That conversation led to a discussion around one of my personal favorite notes in perfumery, oud. During this conversation, we had a chat about what oud actually is, a little bit about what it smells like, and how it's generally used across the Arabic world. It's a fascinating conversation. Let's take a look. You sort of unpack here, but this is no ordinary oud here, Ali. What kind of oud is it?
Originally, the first few batches, it was called Oud Mustafa, which was a particular line or a batch that a gentleman called Ensar Oud. He's an absolute aficionado. He eats, drinks, lives oud, almost worships the trees that produce it. And yeah, like you can just tell with the quality. I think it's one of the best brands out there for pure oud. And yeah, no expense spared. It's an incredible ingredient. In pure form even. It's not very barnyardy, not too skanky. Yeah, it's just absolute heaven. Like even if you dab the raw form on your skin.
Yeah, which quite often happens, particularly in the Arabic world. So
That's right.
Oud, in Muslim culture, but just in Arabic culture, is sacred. So it's burnt in every mosque. It's often used just in its raw form. It's sort of burnt as an incense, and it can fragrance clothes.
Yeah, they call that bukhur. Bukhur.
Which I have never heard that description before, so that's fantastic. Another thing that we can learn about.
Yeah, that smells beautiful if you get top quality. Yeah.
Somewhere we're dying to go to the Middle East. We would love to. There's also like an oil form that I've experienced before, which is an attar that you roll straight onto your skin, or you dab straight onto your skin, which also can be sacred as well. And oud is quite expensive, right? Now, there can be a spectrum, I guess, of how much you spend on this, going from like a synthetic form to maybe a farmed form, although this stuff is not easy to farm. But there are ouds there that are far more expensive than gold or any sort of precious metal. Some of it goes for sometimes millions of dollars per ounce, which is quite incredible. So I guess next question is, what is oud?
I think you summed it up perfectly. I'll handball a bit there.
So I guess, yes, I have had some experience with oud. So it's the resinous heart of a tree that has been infected with a fungus. It happens in nature. So quite often it is an insect that might burrow into a tree, creating a bit of a hole inside of the tree that lets this fungus inside. But it's random. So this doesn't happen to every one of these trees that are out there. And so it's very difficult to farm. You can purposely infect these trees with this fungus, but you don't get the same high quality result. And so people will go out into the jungle and look for these trees to farm them, which is why they're so rare to get in the first place. So the process from there is that we cut down the tree, bring it back, and we have to carve all of the bark off the outside of this resinous core to actually get to the wood itself. And the way that wood smells really depends on where that tree is located. So we can have it located in Laos versus having it in, I guess, what's another location you might find it at?
Vietnam,
yeah, absolutely.
Indonesia.
All over the sort of the subcontinent, right? So, and each one of those woods smells a little bit different or sometimes drastically different.
Yeah.
So it's a really amazing ingredient. And if you haven't got your nose on oud, do yourself a favor, go out and smell something. A great way to start is start with this ember and have a bit of a smell. So
Ali also spent some time talking to us about the storytelling element in perfumery and how for him it's such an integral part of every fragrance that he creates. Every single fragrance has a narrative, and that's actually the starting point for his creative process. Let's hear from Ali now.
and so I guess, what is the importance of storytelling in terms of how you go about the creation process?
It's usually pretty much everything. Yeah. Sometimes I do, on occasion, create the fragrance first, and then choose maybe like a backstory that suits it quite well. But I prefer doing it the other way, having the story, having the theme, and then it helps me get inspired even in a bigger way to create something hopefully spectacular. And yeah, I prefer it the other way, having the theme first.
And I must say, we absolutely loved the story that Ali told about the Rose Bandit. And that centered around a keynote inside of his fragrance, Ismail Effendi, aka the Rose Bandit, of Turkish Rose. It really highlights the importance of storytelling through notes. Let's take a look.
Lace together so many rich roses because, to epitomize the Rose Bandit himself. And I'll give you a bit of a tidbit on the story. This man was around in I think it was in the 1890s, a Turkish man. He was visiting Bulgaria at the time. I'm not sure if it was a post or if it was just like a visit, but he fell in love with I think they call it Kazanluk or Kuzunluk, the area. It's a valley known as the Rose Valley in Bulgaria. He absolutely loved the roses, and unbeknownst to the rose cultivators, harvesters there, he ended up stealing. He cut off a rose sapling, and he hid it in the belly of his walking cane or walking stick. I'm not sure what you'd call. Yeah, cane, I'd say. And yeah, took it back to Turkey. And if you know about the Turkish rose in an area called Isparta, that's sort of like middle to southern Turkey. His sapling is now like a multi-million-dollar rose, what would you call it? Rose crops and the rose industry in Turkey in that area. And it all started from that single sapling.
He kicked it off by stealing the very first rose.
Yeah, no.
For episode 5, we were lucky enough to meet with Callum Mitchell, who's the perfumer and founder at Pairdresseur Parfum. Callum's brand is based in Victoria, and he's known for his not only evocative fragrances, but also for being rather provocative.
So during this episode, Callum introduced us to the idea of fantasy notes. And fantasy notes are effectively a modern creation. So with the advent of synthetic notes, which were born in the 21st century, perfumers were no longer constrained by notes that cannot be extracted via natural distillation. This provides a lot more versatility to the perfumer, but let's have Callum explain here. And so I don't want to skip over any of these important details. So you mentioned that, we've got a banana note here, but that a banana note is not actually a note. Like, you can't just extract these notes from bananas. And you mentioned a fantasy note. Tell me, what is a fantasy note?
It's almost my specialty at this point because I live for the fantasy notes. I find them very fun to make. Like, as a perfumer, they're more challenging as opposed to just, there's something beautiful in using a raw material as it stands. But when you have to use all these different things to create a material, and then you can determine whether it's with the banana, if it's the lolly banana, or if it's like the nail polish banana, or if it's like the, sort of more of a dried out banana peel. Like there's so many things and avenues you can take with a fantasy note. So essentially a fantasy note is something that doesn't exist by itself. It's an accord. And I think we're seeing more and more fantasy notes these days because, we've had centuries of beautiful raw materials, jasmine, patchouli, rose. But now we're getting these like modern interpretations and creative license to interpret fragrance in a more abstract way. And I think these fantasy notes are showing that, and they're popping up more and more. And I think that's maybe the reason you also found me. I'm kind of known for some of the fantasy notes I throw in there.
Yeah, I would agree with that. This is what we're seeing across your range, and we are going to unpack some of your broader range a little later in the show, and I guess it'll make a bit more sense to our listeners as to what we're talking about here. But I would agree with you. I mean, perfumery is a creative process, and isn't it the ultimate creativity to actually pull together a fantasy note that can actually communicate something that is actually not in the fragrance at all, but you're actually managing to communicate banana or whatever it might be. So
Yeah, I think I've actually heard fantasy notes being called storytelling notes as well.
Yeah, I love it.
Which is, I also thought that was really good and helps a new person to fragrance understand it as well.
Because, whatever's listed on the perfume pyramid or the note pyramid of a perfume, it's not always everything that's in there. There's so many little things that are tucked into the fragrance to support, but they're not often present as themselves. So it's interesting because you have to be I'm very loose with the notes in terms of, like with Daddy, there's a lot of like hidden materials in that, raw materials as well, that if I put them in, it'd throw the story off because they're not actually present. For example, there's a little bit of green mandarin in the top, but it's not citrusy enough to bring attention to it. It just gives a little pulpiness to the banana, little, I think it offsets the dry tobacco. And so like using little things like that and more texture or like add to the fabric of the story.
Callum also taught us about anosmia, where certain molecules, such as those that are found in iris, can't be detected by the human nose. This is also sometimes known as nose blindness. The lesson for us here is that you don't really need to be drowning yourself in your favorite fragrance for other people to smell you. Let's take a look at the clip now.
Description. So tell us about porcelain.
It's an iris fragrance. So iris is so fun to play with because a lot of people cannot smell iris because the molecules are so big. So in the nose, they actually give you like anosmia.
Oh,
so like, you can't. So people go, and they just don't smell it because their brain is like clocked off pretty much. This is the non-scientific way of saying it. But so these things that make up iris are quite large molecules. But I wanted to play into that. So like it's almost like an aura fragrance. And I love porcelain. I wear the porcelain and money water. I kind of chop and change between those two, depending on the mood. If I'm mysterious or if I'm, like don't touch me. It depends what energy I'm in.
Okay.
Yeah. So iris has that. So I was thinking like elegant black dress, lipstick smell.
Yeah, the lipstick smell. Yeah, you get from iris.
Yeah.
So you just said a word there. Was it osmia?
Anosmia.
So is that like nose blindness?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's not like the technical word for when you go nose blind, which happens to me with several fragrances. Like I'll spray it on and 5 minutes later I'm like, is it there? Can you smell it? Rob can still smell it, but I can't smell it anymore.
Yeah, so the idea is, well, not the idea, I think that the chemistry or the science behind it is your brain only picks up new smells. So once it's clocked a smell, it's like, yep, good to go. So that's why people can't smell their own fragrance and they apply so much and then they're like, I still can't smell it. And then people like can smell them from the next room because they're picking up on a new smell.
Now, in true Pedrosa style, Callum lived up to his reputation of being rather provocative and introduced us to one of those fantasy notes, being cocaine, which is one of the key notes inside of his provocatively named perfume, Fuckboy. This was an extraordinarily memorable moment in the episode. Let's take a look now. Fantastic. All right, so what are we going to look at next?
Okay. We have to do Fuckboy.
Absolutely, we must do Fuckboy. So this is, this is how I heard about your brand in the first place. Heard about Fuckboy. Obviously, just inherent in the name. It's, not, I keep using the word controversial. I don't think it's controversial. We use this word every day of our lives. I used it several times on the drive in, but, it is, I guess, a little bit polarizing. And so, when you're looking for a fragrance, you might not be necessarily really understanding what you're getting here when you pick this fragrance up, just due to the name. And so I think it's definitely worth unpacking a little bit more so you understand what you're getting and what you're communicating here. So
It's funny because just on the name alone, I was aware. Oh no, I was not aware that a lot of people don't know what a fuckboy is, and that's just maybe I spend too much time on the internet. So I get questions sometimes, like sent to the website, about like, I think people think it means something a little bit more sexual or something, but a fuckboy just is a party boy, a hedonist. He doesn't really have anything he doesn't really stand for anything. He just wants to have fun. And I think that Loose Moral's character was important to me in this picture, because it was a summer collection, and I feel like there are the summer people, or the characters, or the archetypes, very different to the winter ones. And this is almost like, if you're not going to date the pretty boy, you're going to go for the fuck boy. It was like this. They're very different personalities. And so when I was meeting this, I was very aware of, I personally love the smell of pineapple. I don't know if anyone else does.
yeah, I do.
It's something about it. It just makes me so happy. It's a happy scent. So I was making a pina colada accord, and then I found it quite linear. And I was like, there needs to be something. He's not just someone who drinks pina coladas. There's something else. And then it took me a while. And when I was originally thinking of him as the party boy, but I was like, it's too close to pretty boy. Party boy, pretty boy, it would confuse people.
Yep.
But I was like, he is the party boy. What do party boys do? Oh, a lot of party boys, especially in this summery Miami, LA kind of personality, they get up to doing lines. And so I was like, let's put in the cocaine accord. What does that smell like? Let's work it out. And a lot of people do. I'm not the only the brand to do this. Like, a lot of brands now are doing this cocaine accord. I find it's funny because, like, back in the day, having a tobacco accord was quite risque.
Yep.
And now it's like that's normal. Like, tobacco is not controversial or cheeky, but it used to be very like, ooh, that's a bit naughty. And so I think right now we're in that transition phase where people are realizing that people do these things. They do have bad habits, and I'm not gonna, if I'm gonna write about this character, I want to write about him fully. So this fuckboy had to have that little note, and I guess it worked for me in terms of notoriety, and it's a talking point, an icebreaker. But I just felt like it was unfinished without it. So let's spray it.
Yeah, let's spray it. Let's have a smell. And I think what you're just calling out here is, fuckboy sounds a little bit challenging in terms of, just because it's got it's got a swear word in it, I guess. But it's just modern nomenclature for a generation of people that exist in every generation, right? This would have been your hippies of the 60s. And every generation's got that party person who hasn't got a care in the world.
Yeah.
And they're just out there to have a little bit of fun. And that's what we're trying to communicate here with this fragrance. So let's have a smell.
So the top is, I really wanted the cocaine note to be quite divisive. It's like, it's metallic, it's tangy, and the tanginess kind of works with the pina colada accord because there is a creaminess to the pina colada and a fruitiness. And I thought it's very almost basic without a bit of off notes. These off kind of, when I added these to it, I was like, this feels more like the person I'm talking about. It's more metallic. It's more, and it's funny because the coke note, casual. The cocaine note is a lot more. It's more nuanced to me. I think people are thinking it's going to be really strong in the perfume, but I don't think it's that strong. But maybe I'm just.
No, it's I'm getting that metallic edge, but it's just a slight edge while you've got that real freshness, that sort of fruity freshness that's coming through. So this feels like this is in the summer collection, isn't it? So that 100% belongs in the summer collection. I think it's probably pretty versatile. You probably wear this all year round, right? But this will shine in the heat of summer, spring, anytime it's sort of warm.
Yeah.
And it really does, it screams party to me, for sure. Absolutely. I like this. Yeah, very, very fresh.
Yeah, it's gorgeous.
It sounds controversial, but this is extraordinarily wearable. Do yourself a favor and check this one out for sure.
And thank you for describing the cocaine note, because
Yeah.
when you said metallic, it just helped me to recognize it. And once you get it, you get it.
Yeah, you can pinpoint it. Yeah.
Yeah, because, some brands would interpret, or even on paper, it could be powder. It could be a powdering note, But I wanted to get that sort of nasal drip quality.
Which is part of the experience of cocaine. So we're not going to shy away from any of this stuff today, because this is what the fragrance is about, right?
In episode 6, we met Amanda Thompson from C&O. C&O is a beautiful natural perfumery house from Australia, and it's known for its rich storytelling and connection back to nature.
So Amanda took us on a deep dive into a really important distinction that needs to be made inside of natural perfumery. And that is the distinction between whole botanicals and isolates. So you can have natural perfume that does both or either or. But the distinction that Amanda makes here is quite important, because with whole botanicals, we're using the entire plant ingredient. This speaks to both ethical sourcing and transparency. We love the fact that Amanda places such an emphasis on ethical sourcing. So let's take a look at the clip now.
Yeah.
Let's start with what is an isolate,
Mm-hmm.
and then let us know why you choose not to use them.
Yeah. So if you imagine a plant, when we extract an essential oil, it's made up of, we steam distill it, for example, it's made up of 1,000 molecules, and that makes up the DNA of that plant, and we're extracting the oil from it. When we go to create an isolate, most of the time it's something that we have to leave the distillery for and go into a lab. And within the lab, we use chemicals to extract one molecule from that product. And then one molecule is what kind of carries, I guess, the strongest scent note. So, for example, from an orange peel, you might get limonene, for example, and that's the isolate, or geraniol or vanillum. So these are all isolates, but they're still considered natural in that they've been derived from something naturally. You can do it naturally as well, in terms of you can use fractional distillations and things like that, but they're very hard to trace. It's very hard to know your origins of your isolate. And for us, the reason we choose not to isolate is because I'm a strong believer that it's the whole of the plant that brings the healing properties. So they tried to do a study on Manuka honey and tried to understand what was the healing molecules in Manuka honey, and the study went on for years. And what they realized, it was the whole, it was everything as it worked together. And that's a foundation of aromatherapy as well. So in aromatherapy, you certainly don't use isolates. You only use essential oils, right? Because they're healing. So if you're a trained, and I'm not, but if you're I've learned lots about aromatherapy along the way. If you learn about aromatherapy, you just work within the spectrum of essential oils. You don't use other scents and things like that. So that's why we choose to just use whole botanicals. And also, I guess I work with really niche and small distilleries. So, they don't make isolates.
So you stick to the whole ingredient. That's absolutely wonderful.
Yeah, it's very interesting to me. And I love the fact that, I didn't know that the whole is what makes it healing. But it's just the beauty of nature, isn't it? That's a bit mysterious in how it all works. But as a whole, it does.
Yeah, and I would say that isolates are more like, in their profile, similar to a synthetic scent, that they're, they're really sharp.
Amanda also gave us the insight that scent is normally connected to story, or it might be about a memory that's been evoked. But Amanda's insight is that it could also be connected to a place, or it could be the source ingredient itself. Let's hear from Amanda as she talks us through this.
I mean, interview without someone bringing up memory, right? It's like scent is memory, and it's true. And the big perfume houses, that's what they connect to. So they want to be there for your Mother's Day and your weddings and all that sort of thing. But scent can be something positive or negative, right? And we make this association. It's almost like a bit of a Pavlov's dog kind of thing, where we're trained that scent is now that memory. I guess what I'm trying to do with C&O is kind of, instead of focusing on like singular memories, is actually connect people back to the DNA of nature. So when people spray my perfumes, they go, oh, it's so organic, it smells so natural, and bring them back to nature.
in a way. And that's why our philosophy is so strict on the essential oils that we use and things like that as well. So, yeah.
In episode 7, we met with an extraordinary voice in Australian perfumery, Aisha Hansen. Aisha Hansen is a perfume educator and the founder of Aisha Hansen Fine Fragrances. Her fragrances are crafted with elegance and complexity and draw upon mood, nature, and memory.
Aisha gave us a really important perspective on sustainability, explaining why natural isn't always better, not only from the perspective of cost, but also on environmental impact. Let's take a look. Yeah, and I think sustainability is an important discussion to have in perfumery, and this is why not everything can be natural. It's not viable for the environment for everything to be natural.
That's a huge part of it, and also the cost as well. If you're a big company, you have your own rose fields, and you can have these resources at your fingertips. Not everybody has the money or the resources to be able to spend thousands and thousands and thousands on a liter of rose oil or the top jasmine oil or even vanilla. These beautiful vanillas I'm using, they're really expensive, but they're worth it. But there's that for most people, I think I was saying earlier that they'll smell it and they'll like it or they won't. But it is an education piece around sustainability, so people understand the quality of what they're smelling, the rarity of it, the sustainability aspect. And yeah, it's a big piece, I think, to be explored, because I think when people hear the aroma chemicals, they straight away go to that's something that's negative. Where I'm very much like, these are magic. These are magic. And if people were educated more on why they're magic and where they come from, I think it would really dispel a lot of fear in the industry and with consumers.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good learning for us, and we're still learning about it. It's very interesting side of the industry. We've also introduced to Michael Edwards and the Fragrances of the World, which is a brilliant resource that is fantastic for beginners and actually for everyone to map out fragrance families and to learn more about perfumery. Listen to this clip where Aisha educates us on how much she got out of it.
Before we leave this point, you did mention Michael Edwards. So what's Michael Edwards sort of known for those people who are maybe a little bit new to perfumery?
Sure. So Michael Edwards is just an amazing resource to catalogue all of the fragrances around the world, and the whole concept of the fragrance families, which fragrance fit into which fragrance family. For a complete beginner and someone who's thirsty for knowledge, I found he was really, at the time, the only resource that I could get my hands on to understand and make sense of the fragrance families, the history of the perfumers. I mean, it's just this wealth of information all in one place, which was the first at its time.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that would have been late 80s, early 90s.
And so when we reference the fragrance wheel, which is those fragrance families, we're talking about that Michael Edwards fragrance wheel. It helps us to better understand fragrance families, where they're positioned, and to get an understanding of what you're actually looking at before you even spray anything on.
Yep. And also, if you did have a favourite perfume, you could therefore research other perfumes in that family that you may also like. So it was a fantastic resource. We used to use it all the time in sales because it was like an encyclopedia of, well, if you don't like this one, you'll probably like this one and this one, this one. Now have me grab a bottle to show you, kind of thing.
Yeah, because it's really hard to navigate, because everything is sort of marketed by brand rather than, oh, you like a spicy oriental. If you like a spicy oriental, you'll love these. And so, it points you in the right direction to experience more of what you love.
Yeah, absolutely.
Aisha introduced us to the note of Lily of the Valley. And it's important to note here that Lily of the Valley is actually an accord. It is a very small piece of material, difficult to extract, and so therefore it needs to be recreated. So as Callum explained to us earlier in the season around fantasy notes, essentially an accord is a reconstruction taking individual elements and pulling them together to recreate that note. So when we say the words fantasy notes or accords, those terms are essentially interchangeable. Let's take a look of the explanation of Lily of the Valley with Aisha now. I don't actually know what it is. So what is Lily of the Valley?
It is the teeniest, tiniest, beautiful, it's like a little white bell. It's a flower that looks like a little teeny, tiny white bell on just a little, they're only about that high. They're tiny little things, really tiny, delicate flowers. And so, in nature, you can't squeeze anything out of them
Because they're so small.
because they're so small and they're so the perfumers in this instance have created an accord to smell like the realistic version of the lily of the valley. And it does capture all of those, the delicacy of the flower. And, it is a white flower. It's almost a little bit, I think, aquatic. Like it's very fresh, very clean, a very clean flower. So it's not your typical white flower that can be heady and heavy and sometimes cloying, like tuberose can be a little bit that way sometimes. Some jasmines can be a little bit that way as well. So yeah, it is an accord.
And finally, we discovered the delightful pink peppercorn note, which adds just a little bit of sparkle on top. Let's listen as Aisha explains. Aisha, did you say pink peppercorn?
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about how does that come up as sparkling? Because that is interesting to me.
Yeah, so it's what we'd call a cool spice. So it's where black pepper is a little bit warmer, has a little bit more heat to it, but the pink pepper adds just a little bit of a pop of interest, a pop of spice, and a little bit of lift to something. It can kind of cut through citruses. It can cut through. Yeah, it's just really interesting. Like a lot of these ingredients, when you smell them in isolation, you think, oh, that's interesting. And it can be quite overwhelming, but with the right amount, it just adds a little pop of interest, I think. A little bit of sparkle. It's fascinating how it interacts with the other ingredients. Whereas black pepper, it's just so different. It's so much heavier, and again, it can be quite beautiful.
In episode 8, we met with Eden Mealand, who's the founder of Eden of Yore. Eden of Yore draws on a deep love of flowers, antiquity, and the natural beauty of scent to deliver some amazing handcrafted fragrances.
Eden's fragrances are 100% natural. And early in the episode, Eden took the opportunity to explain to us that we can expect a different level of performance from natural perfumes as opposed to those that use synthetics, meaning that natural perfumery tends to not last as long. And that's okay. As Eden explains, it's absolutely fine to have a perfume that you carry around with you and that you reapply through the day. Let's listen to Eden now.
I really fell in love with it as an art form. I'd never really considered it as an art. I learned about it and learned that it's been around since the beginning of time, basically, that we've been making perfumes, whether it's through incense and smoke, for religious ceremonies, or to, perfume our skin. So I just, really fell in love with the art form of it. And the naturals are really special because they're so precious as materials. And honestly, we're so privileged to be living in a time where we have access to all of these wonderful materials. Like back then, obviously, it would have been limited to a certain region, but now they're just so accessible, but still as precious as ever. And I just feel honored to be working with these materials and continuing that traditional sort of perfumery, which is natural.
Yeah, it's certainly an art form. I think that there's a little bit of a perspective out there, certainly in maybe the fragrance community, or maybe more broadly with consumers, that 100% natural perfume doesn't last. And I think that's where the art form comes in, doesn't it? So it's really about how you actually construct your fragrance using that fragrance pyramid, sort of building up from the base to the opening notes, how you construct it, the types of materials that you select and that you bind together that gives you the longevity out of your fragrance.
Absolutely. But I think, it's also important to sort of acknowledge and understand and accept that natural perfume is ephemeral. So it does not last as long. That's just, the nature of it. But it has been this way since the start of time. Synthetics really were only introduced in the 20th century. But before that, this is the way it was, and there's really nothing wrong with that. And I think, it's sort of beautiful to think of it as something ephemeral, and, if you want it to last longer, you can just reapply it. Rather than waiting the 6 hours, just apply after 3 hours or so.
And we also learned from a previous guest that it's never quite the same. It's different according to each batch or season as well, which is kind of beautiful about natural perfumery as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Eden embraces the idea of handcrafted uniqueness. Her handmade batches of natural perfumery are never quite the same due to seasonal changes, the nature of the source ingredients, and so on. Hear from Eden as she explains to us what makes this so special, because it really did stand out.
Yeah, it takes a bit of bowing around, like just to get the right rose. And as you mentioned before, even the same rose from the same supplier will smell different the next time you buy it. And that's also because sometimes our nose smells differently. But they're so complex. There's over 100 chemicals in every natural material. So it's really, it can be easy to sort of smell it differently every time.
It must be challenging to achieve sort of consistency with that sort of factor in there. But I suppose when we're talking about sort of niche perfumery, which is what we're talking about today, I don't think it really matters if that there's a little bit of variation, from batch to batch. I think that's one of the nice things that you have with niche perfumery that you don't necessarily get with a designer. The designer perfume is always the same, and that's okay because you've got that same sort of reliability. But isn't it nice to be able to experience that little bit of something different each time you experience a new batch? I think that's actually quite a nice facet of these sort of smaller artisanal brands. I really love it.
Yeah, and also because it's like hand poured as well. Every drop, you might slip a drop or two. So that also provides a slight difference. Yeah.
During the episode, Eden introduced us to quite a unique ingredient, Jesuit balsam. We hadn't heard of this particular ingredient before, and it is absolutely steeped in history, and it is a note that is used consistently across Eden's entire range. Let's take a listen now. Jesuit balsam. It's I think you've mentioned a few times through the course of the through the podcast here. All of these notes have a variety of different names in which you can describe them. You opt with the more, poetic names, which I love. It's
Perfect odd brand.
Absolutely. So we've done a little bit of research as well on Jesuit balsam. We have also seen that it can be referred to as friar's balsam. And I think the reason why it's been given this particular name is it relates to the Jesuit missionaries who brought this back from, I guess, the New World, which sort of indicates that it's quite old. But I guess what's the story there with the Jesuit balsam?
Yeah, you got it. So the Jesuits were a religious group, Catholic religious group, and they, on their travels to the Americas, they sort of came upon this material and brought it back to Europe in the 17th century, so the 1600s. And I guess they were sort of used for medicinal purposes as well as, for the scent as well.
And do you know what those medicinal purposes were?
I guess with a lot of balsams, they sort of have antiseptic, anti-inflammatory qualities, especially if you have a skin burn, something like that. They can help to treat that. Yeah.
You can certainly imagine a few hundred years ago with the state of medicine back then, just how valuable something that had antiseptic qualities to it would be, and why they would go to the effort of actually wanting to transport that back from, I guess, what they referred to as the New World back to Europe.
It sounds quite rare. Is it difficult to source?
It's not exactly rare as a material. I guess it's fairly easy to source. It's from the Brazilian tree, the Capefera tree. But I guess it's rarely used in perfume. I think it's because it's not a heavy base. It's not that strong, but that's exactly why I used it here, because I was creating a sort of lighter, greener, fresher fragrance, and I found that a lot of the base notes were very strong and very overpowering. You could sort of smell them from the first sniff almost. So this was just very delicate. So that's why I've used it. Yep.
And finally, we uncovered the Rose of 100 Petals, also known as Rose centifolia. This is one of the main notes in Razel. Hear from Eden as she talks to us about this beautiful rose. So tell us about a rose of 100 petals, which is a unique rose, I'm assuming. I don't know much about it, so please help me understand what is that particular rose.
Yep, it's actually the Rose centifolia, which means rose of 100 petals, quite literally. So I just thought I'd list that as in a more poetic way. And yeah, this rose is fairly young compared to the damask rose, I suppose. It was hybridized in the 17th century by a Dutch horticulturalist, and it's a mix of roses. So it's a mix of the damask rose, the canina rose, and the muscata rose, and it's a pretty fresh green rose, as opposed to the damask, which is a bit deeper, richer, spicier. So yeah, it's more of that green, sort of fresh, delicate, sweet, slightly honeyed and fruity, like lychee notes.
In episode 9, we met the delightful Lucy Bradshaw from Talita. Talita is a natural plant-based brand that draws upon the Sanskrit idea of transformation. They're known for their beautiful mood-enhancing fragrances.
Lucy gave us some insight into why Talita are focused on using all natural ingredients. She also discussed some of the ambiguous nature of perfumery terms like clean and the lack of transparency that we commonly see inside of the perfumery industry when talking through the ingredients that are used. Let's listen to Lucy now.
My own fertility journey and just wanting to go all natural in a lot of my, cleaning products, eating habits, everything was starting to sort of shift in that way. And I started to read a lot about what's contained within fragrances. For your listeners that aren't aware, fragrance is the only category in all of health and beauty that's not required to disclose their ingredient list, which means that it can be a bit of a black hole about what's in it. And that just sort of got me really ticking and going, okay, I wonder if we could actually just completely burst open the doors and, invite full transparency, and let's print our ingredient list, and let's go 100% plant-based, and let's go as organic as possible. And yeah, I guess I'm just sort of on this little quest to, prove that it can be done.
Lucy also explained to us why Talita places such a specific emphasis on where their source ingredients come from. Transparency is very important for Lucy and Talita. Let's hear from Lucy as she explains why.
We're calling out where our ingredients come from, and I don't actually often see this. So I see a notes list, and it's just got the ingredient rather than where they're from.
Talking about where they're from it's just this almost celebration of the communities that have actually grown and harvested these botanicals. And it's just like this sort of like gentle reconnection to the botanical itself. And, just to pay homage to the fact that, this isn't an ingredient that was made in a lab to make it smell like a cedarwood tree. This was grown, this was cared for, this was harvested, this was cleaned, this was distilled, just to really, recognize that. And secondly, it's really about the transparency that we really love. And as far as we can possibly go in our transparency, the better. So it's really those two things of why I love really celebrating the country of origin of each of the ingredients.
Lucy also gave us a lesson in biology and explained to us how perfume is recognized and processed by the brain. It is an absolutely fascinating insight into how our brains process perfume. Let's take a listen.
That's really because scent is the only one of our senses that isn't processed through the cortex of the brain. It's processed through the amygdala. And the amygdala is the exact same part of the brain that's responsible for memory,
which, you know, a lot of fragrance houses harness, but it's also the part of the brain that's emotion and mood. And that's really why scent and mood play such an important role. But then obviously at Toledo, we encompass that and enrich that even further by taking the Vedic qualities and bringing the chakra harnessing energetics to it, in as well as where it's actually processed scientifically in the brain. So it's, yeah, I completely resonate with what you're saying, because, you know, it's scientifically proven that it's, you know, responsible for triggering different moods and emotions and memories.
Lucy took a moment to educate us on the concept of upcycling, which is a process that reduces waste and also adds a certain something special to a fragrance. Let's take a look.
Can you just explain it a little bit more?
Absolutely. So when the rose oil is actually being distilled, it's, you know, it's going through like a steaming or a distillation process where water and steam is used. And so often that would just be discarded, and it's just the oil that's sort of taken from the top that is sort of used and highly coveted. And so essentially, very simply, what we're doing is we're reusing that water that had been used in the distillation process that still has a lot of fragrant qualities within it and lends itself so beautifully. And I think we would have a really different fragrance if we didn't have that upcycled rose water in the fragrance itself.
Okay, so typically that gets discarded as part of the process. It just gets wasted.
Yeah.
Okay, isn't that interesting?
It is. I haven't seen upcycled as a term in fragrance before. This is my first experience with it, so it's very good to know.
And finally, Lucy explained to us that even though Toledo is 100% natural, it is actually possible to achieve longevity through careful craftsmanship and blending and sourcing of unique ingredients. Let's take a listen now.
But from a structural integrity, cardamom is a really wonderful ingredient because it's one of the ingredients that naturally allows us to have longevity. It's a wonderful natural binding agent in binding those sort of more citrus or those lighter top notes to the woody base notes. So it's those sorts of ingredients of really going back to, you know, the original craftsmanship of the way that fragrances were made sort of 100 years ago. Cardamom was their sort of like longevity agent naturally. So it's a wonderful ingredient, not just for its facet of that warm, spicy quality and that slight bit of sweetness, but, you know, how we get that staying power.
That wraps up our recap for today. We hope that you have enjoyed learning with us as much as we've been enjoying learning from these amazing perfumers and founders. If you have, please leave us a review or leave some comments so that we can understand what resonates and what would you like more of.
We'll be back soon with more episodes and more deep dives into perfume. As Robin mentioned, if you like what we do, please make sure to like, subscribe, and leave us a comment. And importantly, let us know which perfume brands you'd like us to feature here on the Olfactive Melbourne podcast.
Thank you so much for listening. Until next time, please continue to support our amazing Australian perfume industry and get your nose on as many of those beautiful fragrances as you can. Thank you so much, and goodbye.